So you're ready to run your first Dungeons & Dragons adventure as a DM. And in this podcast, this is going to be the foundation here. We're going to explore, in my experience, the most important D&D rule to remember as a DM. Now, when you're starting out as a DM, things admittedly can be a little bit overwhelming because your players at the table, they have the responsibility literally for the adventure, for their character, working with the other players, working with the other characters, winning the game, exploring the game, advancing the narrative, leveling up, all that great D&D stuff. But on the opposite side, behind the DM screen, there you are. There you are as the DM, and you're part rules lawyer. You've got to figure out the rules, navigate the rules, enforce the rules. You're part storyteller. You've got your maps, you've got your adventure, you're putting forth the narrative. You're resolving what actions your players want to take. And at the same time, that's kind of forward-facing. At the same time, there are very real people skills. You have to navigate not only the expectations, but if there's a little bit of friction, which admittedly is rare in D&D, running an adventure, but if your players want to do something that they can't agree on, or if they want to do something that you're not quite sure of, how do you resolve that? In addition to that, if that's not enough, but think of that as a challenge. You're ready for the challenge. What is vital long-term as a DM, not only to be a successful DM, but to inspire yourself, is to make sure remember that you're a player also. You're there to have fun. When running an adventure, when being a DM turns into a chore or turns into something with minimal returns, or like any hobby, any pursuit, any lifestyle, if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to bring that passion. You're not going to bring that enthusiasm. And literally, although it is a game, you're not going to grow as a person. Your long-term D&D DM goal should be to grow and evolve as a person and how you relate to people. You focus on that, and you will have some amazing adventures that your players will be talking about for a long, long time. So, the most important DM skill, layering it over that introduction. Realizing that as a DM, you can't make a mistake. One of the things that we're looking at, I use the term developing your vision and voice. We all have a player personality, a DM personality. Based on that, there's certain types of adventures that you're going to want to run, that you're going to prefer over others. And there's no correct or not correct, right or wrong type of adventure. Some DMs like pure combat, others like pure roleplay. A lot like a mix. You might prefer high fantasy, low fantasy. But the adventures that you want to run, freeing your creativity up, freeing you from worrying about the mechanics and how are things going to work out, and are your players having a good time, or are you doing this correct? When you have that checklist in your mind, when you're thinking about that in your mind, it's hard. It's harder to bring out that personality, that enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm is what your players at the table or online are going to connect with. So we want to break down those barriers so we can cultivate, we can push forth literally this concept, this idea of your vision and your voice. So you can't make a mistake as a DM. And think about, if you haven't played your first game yet as a DM, maybe you've played it as a player, or maybe you've seen online various games. We have the DM screen, the Dungeon Master screen. It could be a simple chart. It could be a lot more elaborate, made out of wood. But that's the divide. That's the physical divide between the players and the DM. Behind that screen, everything's secret. You've got your dice, you've got your notes, you've got some maps, maybe you've got your miniatures, you're writing stuff down, you're keeping track of stuff, you've got a timer of what's happening next. You have literal world-building knowledge. Now visualize in front of the DM screen as a player, or if you've been a player, what do you know? What do you really know? Only what the DM puts forth. Only what the DM, the Dungeon Master, lets you know as a player, and then based on that, you take some sort of actions in terms of skill checks or resolving interactions with non-player characters, NPCs, things like that, and you communicate back and forth with the DM. So as a DM, with that advanced knowledge, if you miss something, if you forget a rule, if you make a mistake, only you know that. A great example from an adventure, and I'm going to condense it a little bit. It was a large dungeon. My players had wanted to just go old school D&D. You know what? Let's go in a dungeon. Let's just hack and slash and loot. I'm going to put a little bit of a story behind it, but that's the adventure they wanted to run. So I pulled out from my DM notebooks over the years some really, in my opinion, cunning and deadly traps and other things to really make it memorable on there. And I put together this kind of death trap dungeon, and we sent the players in. And at the center of the dungeon was an artifact, and they were the narrative. There always has to be a narrative, a story, a reason, an inspiration. This artifact was at the center of the dungeon. It was a pair of crystal dragon wings. You put them on, you can fly like a dragon on there. Obviously, it was described a lot more elaborately. And in order to get the players into the dungeon, two rival wizards were competing against each other. And they decided to settle this dispute to send in a group of adventurers. Each one can recruit a group of adventurers, send them into the dungeon, and whoever gets the wings and gets out claims it for the wizard on there. So the players go in. I had an NPC, non-player character party. We sent them in, and we had this race mechanic going on, this timer type mechanic going on. And part of the center of the dungeon was a vault that you had to unlock with a number of keys. And one of my players, he plays an amazing rogue. Sometimes he plays an assassin. Literally every gold piece, every copper piece must be obtained. Anything of value in the dungeon. This one dungeon I had a lot of furniture in and some very rich temple quarters. It was like a cult going on. And that assassin and the dwarf in the party, they're literally looting everything. They're like a furniture moving company carrying everything out. So I say that because the party was very thorough in exploring everything. And in comparing maps at the end, looking at their map on the table versus my map, they were about 99%, 98, 99% that they had uncovered, they had explored. They needed 4 keys to unlock the vault. They only had 3 keys. I made a mistake because one of the very first encounters, there were some lieutenant boss monsters wandering the dungeon. When they fought this ogre and they killed the ogre had a key around its neck. And I forgot it. I forgot in the looting process to tell them. And now to go back and backtrack on that and research, it was going to kill the narrative. I made a mistake. But did I make a mistake? They didn't know that. So what I quickly did in the moment, because again, if we can free up our vision, our voice, we can get creative. I had the ogre re-engage the characters. Like it had regenerated a little bit. Hey, maybe it had some troll blood. Who knows? Maybe it had a healing potion. And there was one last final encounter. When they beat it down, it drops the key out of the hand. Now, I did it a little bit more elegantly than that, but I use that to illustrate a great example of you can have something very complex, forget something, leave a rule out, change something, just roll with it. Do not be afraid as a DM, as a dungeon master, to make a mistake. You can't make a mistake. And if we look at every edition of D&D, all these editions, I've been playing D&D, I've been enjoying D&D since the D&D Red Box basic set and AD&D. So a lot of this is kind of squished together, crunched into my mind. If I look at every adventure, every version of D&D, somewhere in the Dungeon Master's Guide, usually the front, but I think in AD&D it was in the back, there's this little summary. There's this little paragraph that says, as the DM, you can't make any mistakes, really. And all the rules are optional. All of them are optional. As the DM, you get to pick and choose how you want to run your games. Here's a great suggestion. It's called the rule set, but it should be a rule set of freedom, not of imprisonment. So now, as you go through my podcasts, as you check out some of the articles on my blog, and as you check out some of the posts on my Patreon page where I'm working out my Dungeon Master's notebooks and some adventures I'm working on, that foundation, let's develop your vision and your voice. And let's not worry about, as a DM, making a mistake.